And welcome everyone to the Sovah Says Scouting After Hours show, bringing you another episode here, number 2 here of the series we will do leading up to the NFL draft in 2026, April's NFL draft. Want to also say hello to everyone on TikTok, anyone that's come in and following along there. If you missed our first episode, we broke down Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods and sort of started with an initial breakdown before the draft process really kicks into full swing here. This is the season where players underclassmen are declaring their eligibility. Seniors are now moving on to the draft process as we close in on things like the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine Game, different games to showcase the all-star talent around the country right now. So what this show and what these episodes are to break down individual players, often with a little bit of a Bengals slant, as a lot of my background comes from following them. That's obviously my favorite team. But let me just give you a brief breakdown of my background. I'm a veteran of over a dozen trips to Mobile to cover Senior Bowl week, over a dozen NFL scouting combines, over a dozen NFL drafts, and produce shows like the Path to the Draft, produce the NFL Draft, the NFL Scouting Combine for NFL media. So a little bit of, I guess you could say, experience with these events. Obviously, these are my favorite. This is my favorite time of year. If you don't have a team that's challenging for a Super Bowl, obviously you're going to turn your attention pretty quick to Mock Draft Mondays and following how things break down with these players. So this week, mentioned it earlier, this week's episode focuses on Ohio State safety Caleb Downs, consensus top safety in this year's NFL draft. There are some questions maybe about size. He is like an unofficial 6 foot, 205 pounds. Those types of things will become official as we get to Indianapolis for the scouting combine through pro day season at Ohio State leading up, so that teams will have a definitive size and be able to really get a feel for, weed their way through all the misinformation that sometimes these college PR departments put out there. Want to welcome anyone that's with us here on YouTube and on TikTok. Appreciate you guys joining in. So what I'm going to do is kind of, take you under the hood here and scale back the curtain a little bit as we start to put together our database of players. So as you'll see here, we'll highlight Caleb Downs today, and I'll kind of walk you through as I, start to input this stuff. We have just sort of the generic information here. Just had a birthday here last month. Georgia native, an underclassman coming out of Ohio State as a junior, did officially declare through social media in the last couple of weeks to give his intention. So what this document also does is track stats. We want to go back, as far as they're given. If we're running into a player who has been eligible for 5 or more years, don't really feel like the stats need to go back as far. Maybe just his last 3 seasons. These players' bodies mature, their minds mature, so they're obviously not going to be the player that they were. I don't know if the statistics need to go back that far. Any sort of all conference and postseason awards we will look at. Also wanting to know whether or not a player is a captain. For some teams, this is an important category. This is something that through the meetings that take place in Mobile, the meetings at pro days, teams, especially like the Bengals, have in recent years really put an emphasis on drafting guys who were captains at the previous level, hopefully, and hoping some of that translates once they get to the big leagues. As Senior Bowl, like we talked about, Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine, those are just days away at this point. So we're able to get some information on some of these players there. We'll get combine invites, and then in through February, once the NFL scouting combine happens, we'll input these sort of things Today, we will be able to, we will look at the statistical profile of Caleb Downs. I am personally, and I feel like some teams put a large emphasis on production. And so your stats, and those types of things are going to be really important as we look to break down who these kids and sort of project at the next level. One thing you don't want to, as a front office, you don't want to take a kid who's shows you sort of who they are in their first couple years or their college career, and hope, especially with a premium pick, that they're going to become something at the next level that they've never been in their lives. There are obviously examples of guys with very low production profiles, but had, bodies chiseled out of granite and look like guys that just had all the athletic traits kicking. If you were watching the playoffs this season, especially if you were watching that Houston Texans game today, you saw a guy like Daniil Hunter who had low numbers of production in college, but has been on a Hall of Fame progression as a professional through his years in Minnesota, and now just absolutely taking it to the next level with the Houston Texans and looking like the All-Pro and Hall of Fame caliber player that maybe his, production profile didn't show coming out of college and LSU, but he has absolutely been that guy at this level. So, maybe he's just the example that makes the rule, but definitely a guy that had measurables that were too good to pass up for Minnesota. They spent, believe a 3rd round pick on Daniil, and it paid off in a major way. So we will want to look at things like that. So also do a pro player comparison. It just sort of helps when you are looking at someone, if he's starting to remind you of someone and you go back and look at highlights and film of that NFL player that you're reminded of by this player, you can start to piece together, what sort of production potential they have, what types of schemes that they may fit into at the next level. And I think that the comparisons actually sort of really help you visualize what you're looking at, put all the clues together, and really, sort of get a full picture with this puzzle. So we will grade once all the production for all the players are in. We will look at the percentiles and assign grades, and those will start to trickle in very late in the process. And as we sort of wrap everything up, late March to early April. So as pro days are finishing and we have all the information that we need, we will do that at that point. So let's dig in here on Caleb Downs and let's look at this statistical profile in 2025. A total. So the tackle numbers for Caleb Downs have gone down each season, but without watching the tape to sort of understand why, whether it was a shift in philosophy on defense, whether that was the emergence of guys around him and him not having to make tackles as a safety, whether he was a box safety for the majority of that year, or he was playing the deep half and having to come up and rally because the defensive, the front seven wasn't making those tackles. You never really hope that your safety is a leading tackler, because that typically means that your defensive line and linebackers aren't cleaning things up. But in the case of Caleb Downs, maybe he was playing more in the box safety than he was at the end of his career. So let's look at in 2025. Let's put in here 68 tackles, 2 for loss, and a sack. How many interceptions? Now, the fun thing about Caleb Downs as a safety and as defending the pass game, consistency. We see 3 straight years of 2 interceptions each in each of those seasons. So in 2025, 68 tackles, 2 of those for loss. He threw in a sack, did have a couple of forced fumbles, a career high in that number, and then the 2 interceptions that are the standard for him in each season. Now, in his sophomore season, 81 tackles, so a really good number here for a safety, and a half sack. How many for those tackles for loss here? We don't have those. Let's see. So this wasn't tackle for loss. This was actually forced fumbles. My apologies there. But 81 tackles, half a sack, 2 INT. He did have, and this is a career high here by far, the 6 pass breakups. That's a good number for him. So getting involved in the passing game and making a difference with the ball in flight. 81 tackles, a half sack, 2 picks, 6 pass breakups as a sophomore. His freshman year, though, he was a demon. With over 100 tackles that season, did not have a sack, did have 1 forced fumble, and the 2 interceptions, and the 3 pass breakups. So just looking at these 3 years, looks like a guy that does get his nose involved in the run game, not afraid to come up to the line of scrimmage and make some plays, can strip the ball, and is getting a couple of picks per year. So, initially looking at him on the game, and we will watch some highlights here and see some all-22 breakdowns. He is typically a guy that is playing close to the line of scrimmage. And making a lot of plays there. So not quite probably as many opportunities, chasing down receivers deep and making plays on deep passes. But there are examples of that on the internet, and we will go through those. I'm guessing that Caleb Downs is an All-American and All-Conference player. Let's look that up. So unanimous in 2024, All-American. And 2-time. So let's just call it 2-time. 2-time. And then let's make that a 2-time unanimous All-American. So basically the top honor that he could get from a team aspect. Let's see if there were any postseason awards here for Caleb Downs. Any additional postseason awards. So he did win the 2025 He won the Jim Thorpe for the best defensive back and the Ronnie Lott Impact. So all awards that really secure his spot as the top defensive back in this draft. Ronnie Lott, obviously a corner turned safety in the NFL, one of the greats in NFL history, Hall of Famer, recently had this award given. So for Caleb, that those are going to be some big. Let's move those over into the other category. Let's see if anything. Let's see if we can get the skinny here. Was he a captain? I can't imagine he wasn't. Caleb Williams is a standout safety and designated team captain for the team, so we will give him a captain's check here. Again, these are things that some teams value more than others as far as captain status, and teams like the Bengals, they absolutely do. They've absolutely taken into consideration that they are interested in captains. Those are the kinds of guys that they want, hoping that translate at the next level anyway. Combine, Senior Bowl, those are all things that we are still waiting on at this part in the process, which is still pretty young, still pretty early. Here's one I wanted to get to before we start watching video and highlights and tape. I wanted to talk about, for me, Caleb's pro comparison. And, people are going to think about he's the best, prospect at his position. If we're talking about generational type talents, which, is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Is he the best safety prospect to come out since Derwin James? Not quite the same player, but there are similarities. Is he the best safety prospect? Is he Ed Reed? He is not, because Ed Reed's more of the center field type, but Ed Reed could truly do all of it. Is he Troy Polamalu? Maybe there's some similarities there. There's definitely some size differences when talking about Troy, but you see some similar instincts. You see some similar impact in both defending the pass and coming up into the box and being a run guy. But for me, the player he reminds me of most is a player who went in the second round of the NFL draft and won a Defensive Player of the Year award in the NFL with the Indianapolis Colts, and that's Bob Sanders. And for me, Bob Sanders, is like the sort of Mighty Mouse, undersized safety that really kind of did it all, was a predator in the box against the run. And I hear a lot of the things when I watch some of these shows and hear analysts talk about Caleb Downs. There's a lot of questions about size. Bob Sanders had all the questions in the world about size. I think Bob Sanders was shorter. I don't think Bob Sanders got to 6 feet. You know what? In fact, let's get his exact measurements here so we can be as accurate as possible. All right. So Bob Sanders was a lot smaller, but if you go by the weight, they're exactly the same. Bob Sanders, 5'8", 205, so a lot more compact. If you go by what Ohio State has on Caleb Downs, they're listing him near 6 foot. So I'm not sure why a lot of people have size questions about Caleb Downs, especially when talking about a safety or a defensive back in general. 6 foot seems like a nice height. Not everyone is going to be Bobby Taylor and 6'4", with like huge wingspan. But the weight is the same, but you get the same sort of impact, and it's sort of based on, the same thing. When Bob Sanders was coming out of college, he had some Darnell Savage There were some comparisons with the two, different body types, but I think people thought they would sort of be the same player. Bob Sanders obviously won a Defensive Player of the Year, was a vital part of that Colts defense in the Manning area. And that's, I think, to me, what Caleb Downs could be at the next level, depending on where he goes. Now, you're always going to hear around draft time, if you're watching the Path to the Draft shows, the ESPN draft segments and draft shows, you are going to hear the word, especially for a guy who plays safety, you are going to hear positional value. This term is going to get thrown around ad nauseum. And it's sort of a prehistoric term, because I think teams need to just draft good players, regardless of position, regardless of need. They need good, talented players. And in the Bengals case, they need good players trickled around their entire defense, regardless of position. So it doesn't matter. I don't think there's going to be much conversation. There shouldn't be anyway, whether a defensive lineman's position holds more weight than a safety. I'm telling you, that safety is going to be on the field more than the defensive lineman is. He's going to have way more snaps. So that value of the safety that's being brought down never really made sense to me. So to me, I see Bob Sanders when I watch Caleb Downs play. And I think the more and more we start to get into this process and further into watching more tape, watching more workouts, I think we'll start to see that he could have that kind of effect on the next level. So why don't we take a look at, and I know we're going to watch, the YouTube is great with all of these highlight reel videos for each player, each prospect coming out. It's always a ton of fun every year, just kind of being able to watch everyone's video they put out. We won't play any of the video or any of the audio, because a lot of times those are, they've got, copyrighted music, and we're trying to stay in business here. But let's watch some of this together, and we'll kind of get a feel for some of the energy and the impact that we could see Caleb having at the next level.
Arch Manning under pressure. Takes his time. Shovels it off. Not enough for first down.
It was earlier in the year against Texas, Manning, where they opened the season with.
Trouble. Got it away. Caught, but not enough for the first.
Here you see him in the box, on fourth down.
In trouble. Got it away. Caught, but not enough for the first.
To his tight end, sticking to his man in coverage, makes the stop.
And Ohio State.
Those are the kind of things you want to see.
But once again, does not break.
Can he wrap up? Can he tackle? Here he is, kind of coming from center field here.
Flushed out.
The flat to make a really nice play.
Right on the stop is Caleb Downs. Nowhere to go.
Are there broken tackles? Is he a guy that once he gets his hands on you, is it a wrap? Are you done? He bluffs the coverage here. There's one of the two interceptions he got. Bluffed the coverage, did a great job of coming back and making a play on the ball, getting the interception. Here you just kind of see some raw athleticism out in space.
American safety says numbered and short. Let's see what they call here.
They didn't when they were down goal to go. They're going to throw for it instead. And they still aren't going to get it. Decker DeGraff got the catch, but
able to get it.
Looks like about a yard shot.
Short gain, if any at all.
They got 23 out of it, and now Coleman trying to cut it outside, spun around and dropped
in the run
by
game,
who else?
And he kind of
Caleb Downs.
I just want to know
some of that garbage.
Just like
that's a nice pick right there. Those are the kind of things we need at safety. Here he is on a blitz.
Giacomelli gets back to the line of scrimmage, and that's it.
Nice run.
Caleb Downs, the All-American safety with a tackle at 4 right now.
Gotta run it though.
And they do.
And a robber roll here.
They're going to come up a yard
Short
shot.
tackler. Guy gets down. And obviously, these are highlights. There aren't going to be any missed tackles, but you're going to see just, these are the types of plays. This is the player he is.
Gives it to Allen, and Allen hit
sort of
as he gets to the line of scrimmage by Caleb Downs. No gain.
Positions of the field, just in this video alone. So the versatility there, and there he is dropping off into zone coverage. Gets the interception in the end zone against Penn State. Really nice play there by Downs.
They did go with that man coverage. They're trying to send a pressure.
Can he play man-to-man on some of these tight ends? That'll be interesting to watch. We might see some of that here. We saw one play earlier. Is he a guy that defensive coordinators will trust man-to-man, maybe in the slot, coming down on a bigger receiver or on a tight end?
Play loose, but the issue is here comes the boogeyman, Caleb Downs. He does not miss tackles in the open field. Not only that, he'll punish you.
This looks like another look at it.
The sights and sounds of football. My goodness, expression is disappointed.
Take advantage of the receiver being a little off balance there, but there he is, making a play on the ball in the air, and someone else benefits the interception. Those are the types of plays Caleb Downs is giving you right there that, affecting a game in multiple ways.
Back to that penalty
doesn't always have to fill up the stat sheet on his own. If he's making plays and disrupting offenses, and other guys are getting stats off, and that's a really nice play. Fighting through that block right there to make the tackle out in the flat. Here he is on a bunch set, fighting through, and just being a monster and helping his teammates rally. Bringing him on a blitz here. This must have been one of how many sacks did he make?
Tell me this is not NFL stuff.
Second and 10 at the 25.
Here comes the blitz, and it's Caleb Downs. Hello. Tell me this is not NFL stuff right here. Look where he starts, Gus. And he's just going to run all the way into the middle of the line of scrimmage.
Nice blitz right there.
Usually has to have that, but how do you see that if you're a running back lined up on the opposite side?
He moves.
He comes from so far back, and yet he's so quick.
He's gonna be a guy in Indianapolis.
Underwood on the play action fake. Underneath and broken up.
Cuddle drills if he chooses. Now he's a guy that would seem to be a top 10 lock. Some people have him as the best defensive player in the entire draft. Additional value, which we talked a little bit about earlier, is going to determine whether he goes top 10 and where he ultimately lands. I can't imagine he would go past the Bengals at number 10.
Back throwing, hits Tony, he stumbles, but is able to keep his balance, and then he fumbled the ball.
Safety spots through free agency, they may look to a guy like Peter Woods, or just looking to a guy like Dane Falls. This was a huge play. Makes a big hit, forces the ball loose in the playoffs for them. Caleb Downs, obviously, a guy that, as we watch more and more, the athleticism, those sort of things are going to jump off the screen at us. He is just an absolute demon. And to me is, going to have an impact like a Bob Sanders, where he's going to make it all over the place. Let's look at some Bob Sanders highlights with the Colts. So maybe we can kind of get a feel together about the similarities between the two. As I pull up some Bob Sanders here. All right, let's watch some Bob Sanders, and maybe you'll start to see some of the things that I see when I watch Caleb Downs.
Pitch out the play line. A block by Wickman. And a tackle in the secondary made by Bob Sanders. Gain of 6.
And Blaylock caught that one right on a
5'8". The guy was
And he's still down.
But
look at that helmet right on the right quad.
But it was able to
just above the knee,
like
right
you saw
in
there,
the quad.
low man win.
Right
a lot
where
of
Sanders put that helmet.
Taking guys out from their knees was pretty typical. But you see here, hitting power, making plays on the ball downfield.
Drilled on the play by Sanders.
Mack truck. Similar here we see in the run game. Boom. Sure-handed. Guys get to him and
helmets were
it wasn't a guy that allowed
Sanders was the first to hit Tatum Bell.
Yak, even yards after, not even
That's
after
Sanders
catch,
again,
but after
flashing
contact.
in there, putting that flip on Priest Hall.
First and 10 down
For
to Davis.
me, when Bob Sanders hits you, so, and that's where the Sovah nicked
again.
Bob Sanders. First time I met Bob Sanders,
They get knocked down.
gave him that.
Bob Sanders always near the
and
ball.
everyone else I knew.
3rd and 6 for Carr. Hit by Mathis. Fumble on the play. It's loose. And scooped
So,
up by Bob Sanders.
what you see here, the athleticism, some of the speed, all very, very much like Caleb Downs.
Sanders,
In the comments,
Iowa.
guys, tell me, what do you think? What do you think of Caleb Downs? Do you see some of the Bob Sanders similarities?
It's intercepted on the
Caleb Downs
ricochet,
remind
picked up by
you guys
Bob Sanders.
And
throw
if
it in the
anything,
comments.
It's an interception. The ball never hit the ground. It hit the body and was
Caleb,
kicked up by his other leg.
going in the
And
trap,
Sanders was right there to grab it. And that
even
is
if
Bob
he's the top
Sanders'
safety,
first career
worthy
interception.
of a top 10 pick. I don't know. Let us know. We'll talk about it. Yeah. So just an intimidating guy. The problem with Bob Sanders, unfortunately, was maybe that size and led to some of the injuries that forced him to retire early. He had a huge impact when he did play, obviously, winning a defensive player of the year award.
And the floor doesn't work as Bob Sanders comes in on the blitz and knocks down.
Just a guy that came on.
Bob Sanders has
and
been in
made
there
an
the whole
instant
night,
impact.
hasn't he? He's been up and around the line of
Iowa.
scrimmage, making hits all night.
So yeah, in the comments,
when you have a safety
let me
like
know.
that,
What do you
that you
think?
can play
What do you
back,
think of
and
Caleb
then you
Downs?
can bring him up like
what do you
this,
project
and he
him
can
at?
hit
Where do
like
you
a
see him
linebacker.
in the NFL draft?
It's Taylor
Is he a guy
the line
that
of
the Bengals
scrimmage
should
and
target?
dropped it for a
Is he a
loss.
guy that the
Bob
Bengals
Sanders
might need
up
to
from the
trade up
safety
to get?
spot.
Where do you see
The
him
Colts
going?
were ready
Kansas
for it,
City
and
music
back
highlight
for a loss
at number
as
9.
Bob
What
Sanders,
we are
who's been
seeing,
all over this field in the first half, shovel pass to
players
Brady,
like Dante
and the tight
Jackson
end.
going
Did he
back
lose
to
it again?
Oregon
Bob
is
Sanders
now
came
the
in
New York
from the
Jets.
right side and looked like he
Don't
might
have
have
a quarterback
been the
to
guy
go
that
after.
knocked
There
it
may not
loose.
be another quarterback to go. So how does that
Coming up
affect
to
the
make the quick
defensive
play, Bob
players
Sanders.
going in this year's draft?
And that wasn't in the rules. That's why they only had one. Brady throws
People
into
were
traffic
hoping
down the middle,
for
and it's
David
intercepted.
Bailey,
Picked off
Ruben
by
Baines,
Bob
who maybe
Sanders.
hit a
Here
slide.
comes Sanders, who is a deep
Ardell Reese.
safety.
Although
He
Ardell
comes
Reese is
around
probably a
there
top
and
3
picks it
pick.
off.
Could one of those guys get one of those uncharacteristic balls in the NFL draft and wind up at number 10? We see it all the time. There are surprises.
Yeah,
People
watch Bob
trade in to
Sanders
grab
here.
guys
That
that
was Tony Dungy was talking
trade up
about
to
how
grab
he's the
guys that you had
eraser.
no
That's not an
idea.
eraser play.
That you
Bob
were
Sanders strips it.
expecting it
An
that way.
outstanding hustle.
Where could we see Caleb
Sanders
Downs
gets
going
it out of there.
in the draft? Throw it in the comments.
Down the sideline.
Give me your thoughts.
Bob Sanders down the sideline. There are some guys on a football team that just emotionally charge.
Bob Sanders, man. I could watch Bob Sanders highlights all day. All right, I want to talk about, or I want to show you some of these plays that some people have highlighted on X, and we'll look at some of this all 22 footage. So these are some run. Look at here on the left. So here's Caleb here. Now watch. Okay, maybe not against the run, but these are just showing his play recognition, feels it, sees it, and then goes and attacks. Foot in the ground and just goes and gets it. gets some help here from his corner, who sort of stops it in its tracks, and then Caleb just comes and absolutely finishes it off. That's what you need to see from your safety. Let's look at another play here. This is some run support here. Caleb coming from, looks like maybe he was lined up in the slot, in the nickel position, and just comes in, takes the back down with help for a loss behind the line of scrimmage. Yeah. These are the types of things. These are the things that, as far as the Bengals are concerned, they needed guys. They miss a guy like Mike who would do this sort of role in 2025. They didn't have that. And so, did they get some of that from Dax Hill? Yeah, but it looks like Dax Hill might be going to the boundary, back to the boundary this year. So could Caleb Downs play safety, come down, be a box defender, and then be a monster off the edge in the run game? It looks like it if you watch his college tape. He's that type of dude. Let's take a look at him here, highlighted. Another one of these screens. Knocks off the blocker. I mean, that's how you shed a block right there. Nope. And then gets in his nose end. This is not going to get on the stat sheet for this, but what you're going to see is he wasn't a liability in this, got rid of one of the blockers, then everyone else can come up and wrap things up. All right, so we had a chance to look at Caleb Downs. A decent statistical profile. You would hope to get a few more interceptions over the course of his career, but what he showed you was consistency with a pair of interceptions each season. A guy that, not sure how many blitz calls he got, but a guy that did occasionally find his way home, and at the quarterback could also force fumbles, could be a tackling machine at times, and is just a super athletic destroyer. And I think with Caleb Downs, you are looking at a guy who is not only the consensus top safety, but you're looking at a lock for a top 10 pick. And it'll be real interesting to see. We'll continue to check back in. We'll have some of these shows where, once we're a little deeper into the process, they won't necessarily be one player at a time. We may want to check back in and let's look at the safety class as a whole and how are they looking as things have started to progress. So stay with the show. If you liked what you saw, give me a like, subscribe. We're going to be doing these often. I know for some of you, these after-hour shows are later on the East Coast, so you just have to watch them as they're not live and not catch the stream, but you can go back and catch them all on YouTube at the Sovah Says channel. So, subscribe to the channel if you want more of this. We're going to be doing draft coverage. We're going to be doing Bengals coverage. Lots of sports, lots of NFL here on the channel. So I hope you like it and appreciate everyone. So thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.